I was 13 years old, my friend Mark decided this would be our last Halloween. "We're too old for that shit," he said. I personally did not feel too old for trick-or-treating until Mark said it and put the doubt in my mind. Maybe he's right, I thought. Maybe there's something wrong with me. The truth, of course, was not that I was too old. It was just that I was too young to recognize that what most people call growing up was an act, a performance to study and master. Just the first in a long series of childish things I'd be required to cast off and act like I didn't care. It seemed like a wasteful and dangerous thing to do. But what did I know? I was only 13. On Halloween night, the three of us, Mark, Jimmy, and I, met up at dusk. Mark, who was taller than us, wore a green plastic Frankenstein mask. Jimmy drew a mustache on his lip and wore a straw sombrero and a cheap guitar over his shoulder. For me, I'd gone all out. I wore the long black cape that I loved and had worn on many Halloweens, painted my face deathly white, wore a pair of plastic fangs that hurt my mouth, but I wasn't about to take them out. If this was really my last Halloween, I was going out in style. We waited till dark to hit the streets. Trick-or-treating by daylight was for little kids. And as soon as the cool night air hit me with the laughs and the shouts of all the other kids ringing out as they hurried by in the dark, I felt a rush of that old magic. So we went to all the houses on our street, the same ones we've been going to ever since we were 5 or 6 years old. The adults who greeted us at the door tossed candy in our bags, but I thought I could sense a little suspicion and disapproval coming from them at the sight of these 3 gangly teenagers dressed up like little kids. Was that what I was now? A teenager? Didn't seem possible. As it got later, we found ourselves exploring the newer streets with the new houses that looked strange and unfriendly, with their huge plate glass windows and circular driveways. Mark and Jimmy talked about how cool the new houses looked, but I didn't think they looked cool. There were no jack-o'-lanterns, no Halloween decorations on these streets, as if the people inside were too busy or important for things like that. Mark led the way to one of the fancy-looking front doors, rang the doorbell. A moment later, a man opened the door. He was pale, soft-looking, and wore an expensive-looking striped sweater that looked like he'd just bought it. He peered at us nervously until we all said, "Trick or treat!" "Wow," he said, "that's right, trick or treat. Halloween, right? Happy Halloween, sure. Come in, come in." He held the door open for us with a big smile on his face, and we paused. No one ever asked us to come inside their house for trick or treat. We looked at each other, wondering what we should do. But Mark was already fascinated by the guy's big, fancy house, so he stepped right in, and Jimmy and I followed. The front room was 2 stories tall, felt like a church or a museum. Jimmy and Mark gaped at the chandelier above, and I looked around and I saw no Halloween decorations, no bowls of candy. "Come on, guys, come on," the guy said, beckoning us to follow him through another door. And that's when I almost turned and ran. But I didn't. I didn't want to leave Mark and Jimmy. Whatever might happen, I figured we stood a better chance together than separated. We followed the sweater guy through a door into another room that was smaller but no less grand. There was a piano in one corner of the room, not a boxy upright like we all had at our house, but a shiny black baby grand piano with the lid raised like a sail. Snow white easy chairs, sofas that looked like they'd never been sat on. "Have a seat, guys, have a seat," he said. "Trick or treat, huh? Trick or treat. I'm sure I got something around here somewhere." Then I heard another voice behind us. A hoarse, croaking voice rasp out, "Gary!" I turned around and saw a woman's face in another doorway. She stayed halfway behind the door, leaning out to look at us. Her face was pale and thin, her dark hair dirty looking, tied tight behind her head. She looked angry, though whether at us or at him, I couldn't tell. When she called out, what I suppose was this guy's name, he froze and looked at her, his smile gone. When I looked around again, it was just in time to see the woman withdraw her head and disappear back into the darkness. The man stood frozen for a moment. Then his smile kicked back in and he burst into action, racing around, saying again, "I know I got something somewhere." He disappeared through another door and came back with a half-empty box of cookies, put them on the coffee table in front of us. I don't think any of us touched them. "So," the guy said, nodding toward Jimmy, "you play that guitar?" Jimmy glanced around the guitar slung over his back like he'd forgotten it was there. "Yeah," Jimmy started to reply, but the guy cut him off. "I can play too," he said, a little too eagerly, I thought. "Here, let me show you something." He stood, reached out for Jimmy's guitar. Jimmy hesitated, then handed the guitar to the guy. I watched the guy sit and hold the guitar on his knee, uncomfortably, I thought. He put his fingers on the strings and started to play, and they were the worst sounds I'd ever heard come out of a musical instrument. It was painful to listen to, painful to watch. "Gary!" The woman's scratchy voice rang out again. I turned back to the door and saw her standing in full view. Her dirty hair had come loose and was wild around her head. Her eyes, ringed with dark shadows, were blazing with anger. This time, I saw she was holding something in her arms, something dark that seemed to be moving. I looked closer and saw that there were more dark things clinging to her, huddled around her feet, climbing up her legs. They may have been animals or something else. The guy stopped playing and stared at her, his smile gone again. "Gary," the woman rasped out, "you're scaring the babies." The man kept staring at her, the guitar forgotten in his hands. He looked back down at the guitar, then at us, his smile gone. I can play too, you know," he said in a faint voice. "I can play too." That's when we left. I don't remember how, but we did. Out on the street again, the three of us looked back at the house with its tall, glowing windows. It was late now, almost midnight. The single whoop of a police siren made us all jump. A cruiser had pulled up right behind us, and a flat, humorless voice crackled at us over the cruiser loudspeaker. "What are you boys doing out here?" "Just trick-or-treating," Mark said, raising his bag of candy for the cops to see. I thought of how we must have looked. Three tall teenage boys wearing masks, walking around late at night, in all these rich people's houses. "You boys go home," the cop's voice crackled at us. "It's too late for you to be out here." "Yes, sir," we all said automatically. Then something strange happened. The street was new to us, and now everything looked strange, even stranger than before. We didn't know how to get home, but we couldn't say that, so we just started walking. I could hear the cruiser creeping along right behind us, its tires whispering softly on the asphalt, making sure we got home. I thought of what the cop had said. "It's too late for you to be out here." And I knew he was right. We came to a crosswalk and paused. I whispered to Mark, "Which way?" "Just keep walking," he said. So we did.